Hi everyone, very good evening. How is everything going on at your end? All well, all well. Okay, I'm just assuming. Okay, anyways, so you have chat box open. Okay, and you can put your if you are able to hear me clearly, you can just put up yes, yes, yes in the chat box. My name is Deepanshu, and I'm one of the co-founder at PyNet Labs with Mr. Abhijit Bakale, and he's the co-founder at PyNet Labs, and he's managing everything technically at PyNet Labs. Okay. So this webinar has been planned in a way that so that you can get to know how network engineers can actually learn Python and why network automation is very much required today. So a lot of people used to ask us earlier, maybe 6 months back, last year, and all that why Cisco is launching this network, automation, Python, DevNet, and all those kind of things. And we used to tell them that this is something that is already here. Network automation is already here today. But still, people used to ask us that, okay, next year they will think about it, they'll start learning, they'll start going ahead with that. So we kept doing these kind of webinars to, advocate as well as, how do you say, to at least teach and preach people that why it is actually necessary today and what exactly it is and how a network engineer who is from, mostly who has been running all their life from Python, from programming, C, C++, how they can learn this thing very easily. Okay, how they can learn this Python and network automation easily. So this is the agenda for today, and Abhijit will be helping us out in understanding the things and nitty gritties in detail. And few lines about Abhijit. Abhijit is co-founder at PyNet Labs, and he has been traveling to international countries before lockdown, and he has given trainings. He has done consulting projects with various MNCs in India and outside India, and he has also been training to people in Cisco Advisory Council as well back in time. So he has very good expertise, especially in terms of network automation, especially in terms of the latest the programming as well as networking, as well as routing, switching, ACI, SD-WAN, SDXS, these kind of products. So he's extensively working in these kind of domain, and he'll be the right person to guide you, advise you about this particular topic. And over to you, Abhijit. Please take it up. And all the best, guys. Please keep asking your doubts. Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much, Deepanshu, for the quick introduction. Hey, everyone. This is Abhijit. Let me quickly share my screen. All right. I hope you can see my screen pretty clear. Now, we're here to discuss about the requirements that we see almost every day, that companies are putting up their expectations that what a network engineer or what a network automation engineer should be doing. So we have been delivering training onto our combo course, which is Python for network engineers plus DevNet Associate course. Now, talking about myself first, my name is Abhijit. You can call me AB, and I handle the technical stuff at PyNet Labs Private Limited. My key expertise, or you can say my total experience in this field, is around for 10 years now, and I've been delivering corporate trainings for this period of time. My key expertise has been in the field of routing and switching, security, and some part of data center and all that. But when Cisco came out with the recent launch of their certifications, I quickly grabbed my interest onto things like automation, onto things like DevNet, and then I was one of the first, you can say, instructors to start delivering trainings on this platform or on the new line of certifications. So it's been quite a long now, almost 3 years. I've been delivering these automation training. Even Cisco kind of launching DevNet. I've been delivering trainings on how you can use Python and stuff like that in order to automate your normal networks without the help of DevNet. But right now, since it's official now, I do deliver training onto the official DevNet curriculum as well. So how I look at that particular perspective is it is really a high time now. Everyone is looking forward towards hiring the people who actually work on automation perspective. But let me give you a glimpse about how Cisco kind of redesigned their line of certifications and how can we move ahead with that according to the corporate requirements that we have. So generally, Cisco have three levels of certifications, right? We have CCNA, then we have CCNP, and then we have CCI. Now the CCNA, CCNP, and CCI, all of these basically, so this is, you can say level 1, that's level number 2, and that's level number 3. Now, the Cisco also has certain tracks that works with these levels of certification. So it has something called routing and switching, then it has something called security, then we have wireless, then we have data center, then we have service provider, and we have cloud, and lots of other tracks, which means that you can pursue CCNA in routing and switching, then you can go to CCNP in routing and switching, and then CCI in routing. This is how you can become master of one track. Then once you're done with that, you can actually move on with CCNA in security, CCNP in security, and CCI in security, and become master of another track. That is how most of the network engineers actually work. Now, the other approach to this is people do, you can say, grab certifications like CCNA routing and switching. And after having the fundamental certification, they move towards CCNA security, CCNP security, CCI security. That's also how they do go further. But you can say that RNS is the most fundamental course that everyone goes through, right? So if anyone wants to step into networking, the very first training or the very first course that you are doing is basically routing and switching only. Now, if you talk about the same thing, then here is the certification that Cisco have launched, which is called as CCDA. Then you have CCDP, and then you have CCDE. Okay, and the track for the certification is nothing but DevNet, which means that now if anyone wants to pursue the career or anyone wants to step into the world of network automation, they will be doing Cisco Certified DevNet Associate, Cisco Certified DevNet Professional, and Cisco Certified DevNet Expert. And Cisco just have came out with the announcement of Cisco Certified DevNet Expert that is officially launched now. The exams are going to be live for Cisco Certified DevNet Expert from May 2022. Okay, but the curriculum for the expert course is out there now, and you definitely can get to know about that. Till now, there was no expert course because both of these certifications were quite new, but now the levels of certification have been completed by Cisco introducing the expert level certification for DevNet. So just like you would start your CCNA journey with routing and switching, everyone is looking forward to start your CCDA or network automation journey with the Cisco Certified DevNet Associate course. That's the #1 course that everyone would be looking forward to do. But since, so I've been delivering this course since more than 2 years now, right? And what I have observed is, and also I saw a couple of interviews of Cisco's top management guys, and they were telling in the interviews that they conducted was the course was actually designed after them having lots of conversations and works with companies who are willing to have network automation tasks or have network automation workflows designed for their production environment. And based on that conversations, Cisco came out with the new line of certifications, which also had DevNet there. Now, they were expecting, or the companies were also expecting, that this will be more of, you can say, application developers or web developers or coders who will be signing up for the DevNet courses, because it has a lot of, you can say, application development, scripting, and all that particular stuff that needs to be done. But it turned out to be the other way around. Companies kind of hesitated to give the entire network in the hands of coders and programmers because they don't really have that much of insight about what's going on in the corporate network, right? So that's why it turned out to be that lots of network engineers stepped up to do the Cisco Certified DevNet Associate certification. And the crowd from application developer, the crowd from application guys or coders was very less. So when Cisco designed the CCDA and DevNet certification, they purely focused on things like APIs, right? On things like software development mechanisms, on things like infrastructure automation and all, for which the network engineer should have some prerequisite knowledge in order to move further with this content. So I kind of saw this as a missing part, or you can say, I saw this as a prerequisite that people who were attending the trainings of DevNet in the early days, they were not really familiar with the basics of Python, with the basics of programmability and coding and all that. Okay, that's why it was getting hard for them to cope up with the content of the DevNet Associate course. And I saw that, and then we kind of designed a custom course by also combining some knowledge of Python. Okay, some basic knowledge of Python. So it's fine if any one of you doesn't have any idea about what coding is, or if any of you doesn't have any idea on how C, C++, Java, and all that traditional coding languages works. It's completely fine because Python has been designed by keeping the perspective in mind that anyone can sign up for this language and they can start learning about Python without any prerequisite. Okay, so we created a course that has a content from Python as well as DevNet. So that's what we have started selling off. Okay, that's what we started delivering to the audience, and it became kind of a hit. So there has been a lots and lots of trainings that we have delivered on Python for network engineers plus DevNet Associate. My entire year, my entire last 1.5 year have completely been busy delivering trainings on automation that includes Python and DevNet both. So people have signed up and gave a huge response for such kind of course, and it has proved to be so beneficial for them that they kind of implemented lots of things that we learned into the trainings, into the production environments, and they got positive results from this. Now, what is the exact content that we do deliver into this particular training then? So we first start by getting to know about introduction to SDN. Okay, SDN actually stands for Software Defined Networking, because be it DevNet, be it automotive, you can say tools or lots of other things, the automation actually relies completely on the concept that we're introduced with SDN. So SDN is a major thing that you guys need to understand. After we understand SDN, then we kind of talk about fundamentals of Python, right? Then we discuss about Python data types. After that, we talk about conditioning and looping in Python. And once we are good talking about Python and all that particular stuff, then we jump into introduction, or you can say rather iOS automation, which means that whatever knowledge that you're going to gain, now this is not there into the DevNet course at all. Okay, all of this particular thing is a part is completely curated from our Python for network engineering. So whatever Python language that you learn into this particular thing, you implement that knowledge in order to automate the iOS devices. So we take normal, you can say R1, R2, R3, let's say. These are three routers that we have. We connect them with a management PC. We build up a Python script and we configure those devices by just running one script or by using one Python script. Okay, that's kind of how we explore how iOS automation can actually be done without touching the CLI. We configure the devices. After you feel comfortable into these basic stuffs, then we get ourselves introduced to things like data structuring languages. Okay, in which we learn about what is XML and what is YAML. So after this, after XML and YAML, we basically learn the most important thing that is there into DevNet course, which is called as model driven programmability. Okay, we talk about model driven programmability, in which you learn about how data modeling can be done. What is Yang data modeling? Okay, a brief about how devices can actually be configured. So there are two major protocols that we talk about. One is netconf, the other one is restconf. We learn about what is netconf and we learn about what is restconf. And we basically do the iOS XE automation using netconf and restconf. Okay, which is completely different than what you're going to learn into iOS automation. On iOS automation, you're going to just use the CLI commands on multiple devices with the help of Python. But with the help of netconf and restconf, you don't have any level, you don't have any benefit, or you can say you don't have any abilities to use your CLI commands. This is where you need to curate your configuration into XML and JSON, okay, which you are going to learn over here. So all your configurations that are deployed onto iOS XE or be it NXOS or be it iOS XR, which are advanced level devices that are deployed onto data center service provider infrastructure. These devices are not used as LAN devices. These are purely WAN facing devices that are used. So all of these devices can be automated with the help of netconf and restconf. And that's exactly what you learn over there, which is completely something that you have never seen into your entire journey of networking. Okay, you are not going to use any single CLI command in order to deploy the configuration onto the device. It will completely be a new world to you. Then after that, we go to some other devices. So we talk about how we can do ASA automation using a REST API. Okay, so we also get to know about what REST API is, how REST API works, what are the different operations that we can execute into REST API, and then we do a lab for automating our ASA, which is a firewall, by using REST API. Okay, and once we are good with that, then we basically jump onto certain small things which are there into the course of DevNet, which is application deployment, and you can say security. And then we also talk about something called version control system, a brief about both of these things, which is nothing but VCS, or you can call as Git. Okay, so this is overall major topics that we do cover into the training or into the course. Now, based on whatever we have, what we're going to do is we will basically, so most of the course is going to be lab focused. So we will be deploying lots and lots of configuration onto the device. And whatever you're going to learn over here, you will be using the same knowledge to actually deploy configurations on all of these devices by using protocols like netconf, restconf, and rest api. These three are the key elements of devnet. Devnet is completely based onto these three things: netconf, restconf, and rest api. If you understand netconf, restconf, and rest api in the best way possible, you're a good network automation engineer. As simple as that. It does sound a bit difficult and a bit tricky, but there needs to be some approaches that needs to be made if you want to step away from lots of network engineers that are there now, right? There are lots of network engineers that are out there who are working with protocols like RIP, IGRP, OSPF, and they're masters in it. But those who kind of crack this new thing that has been brought into the industry, then you will get your special attention from the industry that industry is seeking people from this department, right? So that's exactly what this is all about. Now let me give you a brief about what are we talking about. I mean, what difference does automation and things like netconf, restconf, and rest API makes? Okay, if I give you a brief about a concept uh, called SDN, which is software defined network, then which is often called as SDN. So why do we need automation? That particular part will kind of be covered over here. Let's say, so we both, or you can say all of us, are pretty much familiar that there are lots of networking devices that are used. Things like routers, right? Things like switches, things like firewall, things like load balancer, things like IPS, things like IDS, and lots of other things. All of these things, or all of these devices, are basically created by vendors, different vendors. These vendors are Cisco, Juniper, Palo Alto, you can say Checkpoint, Huawei, right? Or you can say Sienna, and lots of other vendors. And every vendor does gives some or the other ways in order to access how the devices can actually be used. For example, if you have one router, that router can actually be connected with a management PC, and then you can connect to console 0 port, okay, and then you can use a utility like putty to get the CLI access, and then you can configure that device. That's one way about how you access the device. If you expose that particular device to internet, then there can be a remote user which can actually create a connection with this device over SSH or Telnet, and then still be able to deploy some configuration onto the device by using same putty application. Right? This is one way about how it works. The other thing is, if you have some other devices, so Cisco have started introducing GUI access as well. For example, their firewall called ASA. That ASA firewall can also be connected to the same PC, but you have two options to configure that. You can either go with the CLI way, or you can go with the GUI way, which can be done with a tool called ASDM, Application Security Device Manager. If you use that ASDM tool, you can there is no need to touch the CLI then. You can just follow the step-by-step approach of how you can create the configurations for the ASA and deploy that config. That's another way of doing it. But what you need to understand is devices like routers, switches, and all of these stuff, they have a lot of operations to actually handle. For example, if I give you a brief about, like, if you have one R1 here, and then there is one R2 here. If I say R1 is connected to some LAN infrastructure, R2 is connected to some LAN infrastructure, and then we connect them together. Now, when I say this is R1, this is R2, we are using 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. When these wants to communicate with these, we need to implement some RIP configuration or AIGRP configuration or OSPF configuration, or even the static routing will work here. So you do need to do some configuration onto these devices. But configuration is not the only thing, because routers do maintain something called routing tables. And these routing tables are considered every now and then in order to be able to forward the traffic. So there are lots of responsibilities that these devices have to check whether the traffic is actually legit, to check whether the traffic needs to be sent out, or does it needs to be dropped, or does it needs to be, you can say, filtered out in some or the other way. There are lots of things that needs to be done, right? So a network device, for example, a router, it has different functions that it has to perform. For example, it has to check the destination IP address into the routing table in order to figure out where to forward the traffic, right? And it also needs to work with routing protocols like OSPF, IGRP, BGP, and figure out the networks or learn the networks that it is supposed to. If it's a layer 2 device, it needs to figure out the address resolution protocol, the STP negotiations, and lots of other things. So all these responsibilities on networking devices, be it a router, be it a switch, be it a firewall, or any other device, all these responsibilities are divided into some planes. And we have all three types of planes here. One is called as control plane. The second one is called as data plane. And the third one is called as management plane. Control plane, data plane, and management plane. Now, control plane basically is responsible for exchanging routing information or building the arc table or exchanging the routes, right? Or even performing the best route calculations and all. Okay, when the control plane is able to calculate the best route, the same information is given to data plane. And data plane is going to act onto that particular thing. Make sense? So to forward or to drop the traffic or to NAT the traffic or to filter the traffic, that is completely a decision that is taken care by the data plane. Which means there are two types of tables. One, the control plane maintains a table which is called as RIB, routing information base. And the data plane maintains a table called FIB, which is forwarding information base. So the routing information base is nothing but the information that is also, the forwarding information base is nothing but the information that is replicated from RIP. Okay, now here are, you can say, three elements that every device has. If we even consider a router has a CLI access, then it has CPU access, and then it has line card access, which means your Ethernet or Gig Ethernet modules or so. So user is going to sit over here and he or she is going to configure the device via CLI. Okay, so we call it as the user is accessing the management plane. Then the CLI, with the help of a CLI, you basically configure CPU, which means you are accessing or you are manipulating control plane of the device. And then the CPU tells the line cards that which traffic to forward and which traffic to deny, which means the control plane is manipulating data plane. So that brings us to a conclusion that you cannot really go directly and manipulate the data plane. You need to go to control plane, do the configuration, and control plane will tell the data plane about how to behave. You get that? Now these components are available on every single device, which means if you have a complex network, for example, we have a headquarter and there are multiple servers. This is your server number 1, then you have server number 2, then you have server number 3. And if you have some applications like applications over here, applications over here, and applications over here, which actually needs to be accessed by people who are sitting into remote somewhere over here. And you have some like devices like R1 and R2 here, Then you have some firewall, right? Then you have some layer 3 devices. Then you have some layer 2 devices. And then you connect these in this way, in this way. And then you connect both of these out towards the internet, right? When you have a certain scenario like this, we can assume that this is your headquarters. Then every single device is going to have their control plane, data plane, and management plane. This, 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 and even these and these. All of these devices are going to have their control plane and management plane. Which means if we configure R1 onto with OSPF, we also need to do it on R2. We also need to do it on firewall. We might need to do it on some other devices. So there are lots of configuration that happens to have been configured on multiple devices. But this does consume lots of manpower, and the process is actually treated as slow and manual. Even Cisco did a survey and they found out that around 90% of their customers, okay, around 90% of Cisco customers, they are relying on to manual config. And every now and then, engineers do report some problem to their TAC, Technical Assistance Center. And TAC created a report that out of these 90%, almost 75% of people are doing or are raising tickets, troubleshooting tickets, which are basically caused due to misconfigurations that are done by humans. So you can see that how error prone this can be if you rely on a human being, if you rely on an employee to be able to configure the device in a best and possible way. But machines cannot really do the silly mistakes that devices can do. So your machines can actually be programmed in a way to follow the exact instructions which are pretty much correct and tested. You get that? That's where automation comes into picture. So what if you can just use one management PC and deploy the configuration on multiple of them from a centralized point of touch? Okay. No need of deploying the configuration on one by one on all the devices. You can just go and deploy the configuration by just executing a single script. That is kind of a brief example of what Python can do. Sounds good. So this is where SDN actually comes into picture. So SDN provides you a centralized way. The concept provides you a centralized way about how a device can actually be configured. Let me give you a brief example or a brief demo on how we can deploy the configuration onto devices, onto multiple devices by using Python. So I will share my other screen and I'll give you a brief about that. Then. So this is my machine that I was just working with, some Python script. Just avoid that for now. But what I'll do, I'll basically create a simple topology on my simulation, okay, which is going to be, I'll just access my simulation by going on to EVNG. Okay, I will just go on to one of my devices. Let's try and create a new lab, webinar test. And I'll take some routers. Let's say I'm gonna take routers. That's gonna be 3 routers. Okay, with 512 RAM each. R1, R2, R3. And we will configure these routers with some network so that they can communicate with my physical machine. Because we're gonna write a Python script on my local machine. So I'll connect them with this cloud that is actually mapped with my backend device. and I will just start these routers up. And we're going to do some basic configuration onto them, which is going to be, so we need to have a minimum configuration that needs to be there on the device so that our machine can communicate with the admin PC from where the script is going to be deployed. For which we need a remote management protocol like DevNet or SSH to be there. So what I'm going to do, I will basically create some basic configuration onto a notepad and I'll just paste those configurations onto the routers. So first I'm going to go to enable, configure terminal, I would say hostname R1, then interface FA 0/0, IP address 10.255.1.101.255.255.250. No shutdown. Take an exit. Then I would say username admin privilege 15 password Cisco. Then IP domain -name abc.com crypto key generate RSA general keys modulus 1024 and IPSSH version 2. Then we need to enable the SSH by going online with 0/4 login local transport input on. Yeah, that's correct. We need to have GI 0/0. So once I do that, I'm just going to take the access of my R1's console. I'll just increase the font size so that you can see what's going on. Here I'll say no and take the access of my R2. Then I'll say no and then I can take access of R3. Right? I can go on R1 again. My device is up and running, and I'm just going to copy the configuration from my notepad, and I will say paste it. So all our basic configuration is actually done. And then I can take an exit. Now I will just change the configuration for R2 by saying R2, the IP address I'm going to use is 102, and I think that's all. Everything else is pretty good. So I'll just copy this configuration again. Go to R2. I'm gonna say paste it. Perfect. Our R2 is also configured. And then I'm gonna go on R3. Do the modification like R3 and 103. Copy the entire config. And on R3, I'm just gonna paste it. And very good. So after doing all this config, our devices are ready. So if I open up my command prompt of my machine, of my Windows machine, I can actually ping to the devices 10.255.1.101. There you go. We're able to ping them. If I say ping 102, there you go. That's also working fine. If I say ping 103, that is also working fine. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use an IDE, an integrated development environment, and I'm going to build up a Python script. And we will try to deploy some configuration onto the devices. So how do we do that? I'm just going to create a new script. Okay, I'll create a new file and save it as router, or you can say Python automation.py, and I'll save it on my desktop. And we are going to establish a connection from Python with those devices. How do we do that? Is we basically use a library called netmiko. So I say from netmiko import connect handler. Now, what NetMiko is and what Connect Handler does and all of that particular stuff, we would be talking about those things in detail into the training. But I'm just going to give you a brief about what this does. This NetMiko basically gives you the ability to create SSH connections with the network devices by using, you can say, routers. So, or by using SSH or by using Python. So over here, I'm gonna define the IP addresses of my router. I'm gonna say R1 is equal to 10.255.1.101, right? I'm gonna say R2 is equal to 10.255.1.102, and I'm gonna say R3 is equal to 10.255.1.103. Then we will basically create a sample dictionary or a sample list that will have all of our devices. So I'll say all underscore routers is equal to, I'm going to create a list and say R1, R2, and R3. Then I would say for router in all underscore routers, I would say create a device template, which actually needs to be a dictionary. So we need to pass some values, pass some detail to the NetMiko function, to the connect handler function, so that it can create a connection. We need to tell 4 parameters. We need to tell what is the device type. Since we have all of our devices as Cisco, so I'm gonna use Cisco underscore iOS. Then we will be telling the IP address of the devices, which are basically they are stored into router variable. Okay, because we're using looping and all, also about which we're going to talk about into our training, how we can use loops and all. So the IP address will change from R1 to R2 to R3 on every iteration. Then we have some username there. So I would say username is going to be admin. Okay, then after that, I'm gonna say password is going to be Cisco. This is all the details that we need to have. And then we create an SSH connection is equal to, I'm gonna say connect handler and star. I'm gonna call that device template. So with every iteration, it is going to create a connection with R1, R2, and R3 sequentially. And there we deploy some commands. So I'm gonna store some commands in a variable by saying commands is equal to, I will store my first command by saying, let's say I want to create a loopback interface. So I would say interface loopback 10. Then I'm gonna have a second command by saying IP address 10 to 55, let's say 192.168.10.1 to 552.552.550. Then I use the third thing as my description to the interface. So I say description configured, I say description configured by AB using Python. And these are all the commands that I need to execute, okay? So what I do now, after storing these commands, I basically run a function by saying my SSH, or you can say loopback operation is equal to SSH connection dot send underscore config underscore set, which is a function of connect handler. And I'm going to call my commands over here. And then I can also print out the output. So I'll say print loopback underscore operation. Or you can say instead of printing the loopback operation, what we will do is we will try and execute another command by saying interface details is equal to SSH dot send underscore command. And I'm going to say show IP interface brief. That's a command that I'm going to execute, and I will print that output by saying interface underscore details. Okay, this is kind of a simple script that we're going to execute. Now there are lots of technicalities that we're going to look at, but I'm just kind of helping you with looking at a demo of possibility that we can do. I know that this is just going to perform a task for configuring loopback 10 on every device, and the IP address on every device is also going to be same. Now, what I'm going to do when I'm going to run the script, let's see what it does. So that's where we're going to see the output. Also, I'll add one more layer to this. What I'll do, upon every SSH connection, I'm going to print out that a message for user that with what device are we connected now. So I'm going to say SSH connection established with, I think, router. And then I will give a /n over here and a /n over here. Okay, so now I will run my script, run Python file in terminal. Let's see what it does. There, you see that? SSH connection established with 10 to 55 1.101. Now it's giving you an error that says name SSH is not there. There might be a mistake. Oh yes. Over here it should be SSH underscore connection to refer to the SSH. Now I'm gonna run this. SSH connection established with 10 to 55 1.101. There. That's a show IP interface brief output. You can see loopback 10 has been created with 192.168.10.1. Then it went on to the second device. That's the output. Loopback 10, 192.168.10.1 has been created. Then it went on to the third device, and that's the output for the third device. Show IP interface brief. See, all of this particular information is right away available over here. And if I go on to the devices, even on R1, you can execute the command like do show IP interface brief. You can see a loopback 10 has been configured over there. If I say show run interface, or you can say do show run interface GI0/0, there IP address is there that has been configured. And if I look at loopback 0, which is the one that we have created, oops, do show run interface loop 0. I think we have configured loopback. Oh, okay, we have configured loopback 10. And there, description configured by AB using Python. Similarly, if I go on any other device, if I say on R2, show IP interface brief, you can see loopback 10 is there. Show run interface loopback 10. Right there, description configured by AB using Python. This is how we can basically imagine what Python can do with its abilities. And there are lots of other things. There are lots of curations or modifications that you can do. You can accept the data from user. You can accept the data from a file. You can export the output into a third-party file, into Excel file, and all of that particular stuff, which you're going to explore into the training. But yeah, this is a small possibility about what we can do with these Python scripts. Now, about the simulation, this is EVE-NG, which we're going to set up. So in our training, we do have local lab setup policies as well. For this training, we do set up local labs onto your computers so that even after the training, you can practice with the network automation stuff onto your local device without any hesitation for as long as you want. That's how we go about it. So that was a bit of a demo from our side, which I had to discuss about. So we start by getting to know about what Python is. Now this is completely a section that I briefed about, which we discussed about iOS automation. Before you jump into scripts like these, we do go through Python basics, Python fundamentals, Python coding, and all that particular stuff. So yeah, that was kind of a thing that we had to talk about into the session here, where you can get to know about what all are the things that are introduced into the trainings. So we do deliver these trainings in the combination course only because we think that there must be a prerequisite knowledge of Python apart from the DevNet official course. And once we are good with that, then we jump into the content of DevNet where we automate iOS XE and ASA and lots of other devices by using advanced automation protocols. So if you have any questions, guys, on whatever we have discussed or any of your queries, technical queries, please go ahead and ask into chat and I can answer them real quick. Well, yeah, having a brief introduction about networking is quite mandatory over here. If you're not aware about how IP works, how subnetting works and all, then I will suggest you to get yourself introduced with courses like CCNA first and then jump into network automation. Because if you don't know what network is, then how will you be able to automate that? Well, APIs are nothing but, you can say, calls. So there are certain advanced solutions that are introduced by Cisco, which are SD-WAN and then SD Access and ACI and all of that stuff. So when you basically want to communicate with a GUI, with a graphical user interface tool, well, for example, Epic, for example, vManage and vSmart. So when that communication is actually, so the GUI tools are basically accessed from browser, right? Whenever you want to do any communication like that from your PC, you do the communication by using APIs. So you use Python or you use tools like Postman in order to execute HTTP operations. So HTTP is nothing but REST API. So that's how you communicate with that. By using Python, you communicate with the GUI tool and you tell the GUI tool that this is a configuration that I want to push onto multiple devices. Can you quickly share some insight on exception handling? Won't be possible to be delivered right away over here because it requires some prerequisite knowledge as well. But if I give you a brief about exception handling is nothing but creating scenarios into your Python script. Now, whatever script that we have covered, if I share my screen again, there, whatever script that I have covered or created, this doesn't have any error handling. If anything goes wrong, then what? So you need to create your Python script to also take care of wronggoings and how the user should be prompted with errors. That's what exception handling is. So you kind of create maturely about if there are going to be any possible errors, how a user or how a Python script is going to deal with that. That's what we call about exception handling. And yeah, we are going to cover that in you can say in an overview into our training as well.
Abhijit, there is a question from Vikas. I think it's a very good question. I'm working as an SDA on SD and ACI. Mm-hmm. So is there use of DevNet? I think we can discuss.
Well,
yeah.
There is no specific use of DevNet in that particular thing, but by using SDA and ACI, you are basically communicating with your infrastructure by using GUI. So if you further want to automate the configuration of that GUI so that you don't need to log in into your vManage and DNS Center or Epic every now and then, you can basically create Python scripts and even automate the configurations or you can say schedule the configurations that needs to be pushed onto the device via GUI. So you can like automate the automation tools that are out there. So a brief idea about how you do that will definitely be gathered over here in DevNet. There is no use of DevNet into that, but whatever you learn is going to act as a prerequisite for you to implement the automation into your SD and ACI. Mandar says in the case of DevNet and Python, how the course structure will be. I just gave you a brief about what the course structure will be. So you'll be going with the basics of introduction of SDN, then we will talk about introduction to Python and various things of Python. Then we will jump into iOS automation. After that, we get to learn about infrastructure automation by using model-driven programmability, where we talk about netconf, REST API, iOS XE automation, and all that. And then we wrap up by looking at Git, GitHub, application deployment, application security, and all that stuff. That's how the structure will be. The course material will be shared for sure. All the scripts that we're going to work with, the official book of DevNet, and our recorded sessions will definitely be there as a lifetime access with you guys. And the course will be conducted for 40 to 45 hours, 4 hours, 3 or 4 hours per day, depending on the session. You can get the details of them from one of our guys, Deepanshu or Kshitij or Nitish.
So another question came. It is from MS. Not sure about the full name. Currently working on MPLS. Is this or what would be the best for upgrading?
You cannot really compare with MPLS because MPLS is more about traditional networking, but this goes into automating the solutions that companies are looking forward to implement. So if you are looking forward to implement configurations onto your devices that goes inside the MPLS fabric, then yeah, it definitely can be a useful thing. But nothing as such a direct connection between MPLS and automation because both of these are pretty distinct technologies. Then Vinayak says, I am CCNA certified, but I'm confused. What should I choose, security or automation? Well, that's completely a call that you have to take because there is a requirement for security as well. There is a requirement for automation as well. And you cannot really compare one over the other. So if you have interest over security, please go with security. If you have interest over automation, please go with automation. That's completely your call. The industry does require both of the knowledgeable persons. Is NSO part of DevNet? No, NSO is not a part of DevNet. NSO is altogether a different tool that is sold by Cisco. It doesn't come under DevNet.
So, all right, guys, do you have any other questions for us? Okay, another one came. What should be the configuration of laptop to run these labs? Prabhuda, it could be, yeah, Abhijit, you can go ahead.
Well, the minimum configuration that you need is 8 GB of RAM. 16 would be far better than. And yeah, if you have any Windows laptop running 8 GB or 16 GB of RAM, a personal laptop preferred, that will be all. So all these lab setups and files that you're going to require, the images of routers and all, everything is going to be provided from us. You just need to have your laptop that can be connected to internet, that's all. With 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, preferable.
All right.
All right. I think we're pretty good answering most of the questions. So thank you so much for joining the webinar, guys. I hope you enjoyed the content that we talked about in this particular webinar. A very short one, but a brief one. So looking forward to see you ahead into some of the interesting talks that we're going to have in our trainings. Take care of yourself. Do explore the technology. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself. Have a good day and good night ahead. Bye-bye. Thank you.